Hi and welcome. I'm Rhonda Frisha and I know the daily struggles of having ADHD and raising children with ADHD. And I'd like to talk today about ways to harness the benefits of ADHD while avoiding the pitfalls. And I also run Tutor Dr. Belair Towson, and I'll tell you very briefly about that too. I'm recording this session, so I'll put it over on my YouTube channel, and I'll mute the lines while I'm going through the presentation, and you can unmute yourself to ask questions at the end too. All right. So very quickly before we get into it, what Tutor Doctor does, of course, subject help for all subjects. Let me just briefly turn off my camera now so you can focus on the slides. So what Tutor Doctor does, of course, subject help for all subjects. And some kids are struggling in multiple subjects, so we can tutor more than one subject at a time. And more importantly, we can help them kind of build those organizational skills that some kids have in spades. They're just born with it and other kids lack. So what are the executive functions that I'm talking about? We're going to talk about these a lot today, and they may ring a bell in your house. They certainly do in mine. They come up a lot. They are adaptable thinking, planning, self-monitoring, self-control, working memory, time management, my weakness, and organization. So this is the main thing we're going to be talking about today. And that's something that Tutor Doctor does help with. So we also have tutors who are specially educated to help kids with exceptionalities. That's very near and dear to me. And we can also help with professional certifications like the cert to become an EMT or a firefighter, for example. And if you've raised a child through high school, you know all too well that you have to learn a whole new vocabulary, and it's that of college prep tests. So we do a lot of SAT and ACT prep tutoring, and we don't do the college admissions advisory, so that might be somebody that we would work hand in hand with, a college admissions advisor. And one of the things that I think really sets Tutor Doctor apart is that we have local tutors, so they're familiar with the local curriculum and is not the same by any stretch as going into a learning center and here's how you learn Algebra 2, regardless of how your teacher is teaching it back in the classroom. So a couple quick facts about ADHD. Almost 1 out of every 10 kids has ADHD. That's quite a lot. More of them are boys than girls. And about 2/3 of them have a second condition or more than two. Number one is behavioral or conduct problems. You might have seen some of that at home. Almost half of them have a learning disorder. A great many of them have anxiety. A number have depression, ASD, which is autism, Tourette's, and eating disorders, to name a few. And they kind of tend to overlap a bit symptom-wise, and they frequently go hand in hand. So why do I mention these other conditions? Because if you're treating a condition, I think it's important that you identify what symptoms are part of that condition and what may be something else. So today I'm 100% not talking about medical treatments for ADHD, but rather how to work with what we've got. And sometimes that's what we've got left after medication. It happens. So what are the perks of ADHD? What can we turn into a superpower? Well, hyperactivity is one of the hallmarks of ADHD. And that isn't a bad thing in all situations, right? I mean, when you're playing sports, the kids that are bouncing off the walls, kind of do pretty well in sports, right? And those same kids that bounce off the walls today are tomorrow's actors and comedians and soccer stars. Will Smith has ADHD, and will.i.am, another great performer, has ADHD. So spontaneity is the good twin of impulsivity, right? They're really two sides of the same coin, depending on perspective. Creativity and invention are traits that a lot of ADHD people have. And some famous people who had ADHD were Leonardo da Vinci and Mozart. So if you have ADHD, you're in good company there. Hyper focus. So as the parent, half the time we can't get them to focus on what they need to, but the rest of the time they're focused to the point of excluding all else. Like they don't even hear us talking to them. So some Olympic athletes that have ADHD are Michael Phelps and Simone Biles. And we're going to kind of be talking about how they turned their disadvantages to an advantage. Resilience is an amazing quality that a lot of people with ADHD have. Did you know that the ability to cope with stress and recover from setbacks turns out to be a really accurate predictor of future success? So, if you think about it, if you're going through life with all these things working against you, it actually prepares you better than neurotypical people are prepared for their adult life. So, adult life comes with its share of setbacks, right? You've probably heard that Thomas Edison very famously said he found 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb before he found the one way to make one. Another person who had resilience, Jerry Seinfeld, was booed off the stage during his first show. So they demonstrated remarkable resilience. So some of my tips relate to turning weaknesses into strengths, and some of them are just tips about how we can help people that we love with ADHD more. So this is one of the first kind. I kind of say, let them obsess a little bit. Let them stay up late working on something they're really into. My daughter, who happens to be, one of my daughters is neurotypical, that oddball, loves drawing so much that we had to make a rule about finishing the less creative homework first, like the math, so that she can really enjoy her more creative assignments and let them run long. Otherwise, she would never get to the math. So you'll see this reward system come up a lot in some of the other strategies. And it's one of those things that applies to everybody, not just folks with ADHD. Second one, I do encourage parents to expect great things from their child that has ADHD. I'm not sure you can guess what it is, when they're young necessarily, but what they have is at the heart of the entrepreneurial spirit. Restlessness, dissatisfaction with the status quo. Knowing that they have this great future today, I think makes it easier to get through today. So one day, you may look back and say, remember when Joey wouldn't stop building rockets? Or remember how long Susie would sing in front of the mirror? I can't wait to see what I look back on and say, oh, we saw the seeds of that one day. So this is going to be its own presentation at some point because I'm a huge fan of Atomic Habits, the book by James Clear. And he suggests that you think small, that you set micro goals, and you reward these good tiny habits. And I'm just going to give a super high level view here. Just bear in mind that this is my lens. When it comes to changing behavior through rewards, I always kind of default to the atomic habit method. So let's talk about the reward cycle, and it drives all of us in even the tiniest decisions we make all day, adults and children alike. So it starts with a cue. So a cue could be waking up, or opening the car door to get in, or sitting down at your desk in the morning. And we want to associate a good habit with the cue. And, 9 times out of 10, there's already some bad habit associated with the cue, right? That we want to lose in the process. You may have heard the expression, what fires together, wires together. So these activities become attached to the cue. So the habit we want to get into when we wake up, for example, let's say, is doing meditation. Like I said, this isn't just for ADHD kids, this is for anybody. So let's say you want to do meditation, and you want that to be your habit that you get into upon waking up. So we need to link the two together. And there may even be a bad habit that's already associated with waking up, right? You might be scrolling through social media and you don't even notice 2 hours has gone by. So when we wake up, we want to have the new habit, fire. And we need that habit to be easy. So maybe we say, all right, when I wake up, I will meditate for 5 minutes. And in order to make this easy, I'm probably going to have anything I need for that habit, the meditation in this case, right near the bed so that when I wake up, I'm making it as easy as possible for myself to be successful. So I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes and I want to be rewarded. And I mean instantly. So this doesn't only apply to the ADHD kiddos, but they in particular need that reward to be instantaneous in order for this wiring together of the habit and the reward to click. So we have to tie some reward to the 5 minutes of meditation that'll make us want to do it tomorrow morning too. So maybe that reward is your morning coffee, if you're an adult. So we use this innate behavior that all of us already have to make micro changes in ourselves one at a time to become the person that we want to be. And I chose the phrase, become the person we want to be, rather than achieve our goals. And that's kind of paramount to the whole atomic habits concept. But we kind of throw big goals out the window, and you'll see why. I'm going to give you a gross oversimplification of an example. So let's take a student, Henry. And Henry wants to be good at playing the violin. That's his big goal. So that doesn't really direct Henry here in the moment. And if he has ADHD, he lives here in the moment. So he can't become a concert violinist today. So, why should he do anything about it? But what he can do is kind of change his systems or his processes, if you will, so that becoming a skilled musician is simply a byproduct of how he's managing himself minute to minute. So let's say Henry hates doing his 30 minutes of practice. He just started playing this year. He's not that good yet, but he is really into playing video games. So I don't think this is a very far-fetched scenario, right? We can all kind of relate to this one. So when he comes home from school, now coming home from school is a cue, like sitting down at your desk or getting in your car. It's a cue. And the thing has to be associated to a cue. So he's going to look at the living room and he sees his video game controller and he wants to play video games. So since we already have a habit there that we don't love, what if we keep the video game controllers in a box under the coffee table? He takes them out whenever he's playing, but as soon as he's done, they have to go back there. So what if the deal is that Henry gets 30 minutes of video game time after he spends 30 minutes practicing the violin? So we'll see a new pattern emerge. And by the way, we literally use timers for these things. 30 minutes of practice, 30 minutes of video game time. And really to practice for 30 minutes when you know you're going to have a half hour of video game that you've been waiting for all day, it's not that hard to do the practice under those circumstances. So Henry plays his video game after he practices violin, no matter how much homework he has, because this is a deal, like we shook on this, but only 30 minutes. And then those controllers have to go back in the box out of sight. You can use Alexa to time these things, Alexa, set a timer for 30 minutes, or you can use the time timer app, which not just the app, but the actual clock, which works really well with the kids that have ADHD because it's visual and they can look up and see in red exactly how much time is left. But as long as Henry is living by those rules, that one task is taken care of. So after a few days, maybe a few weeks, he can manage this task without supervision, hopefully. And coming home from school is hardwired linked to playing the violin in a way that is no longer begrudging. In fact, as he evolves as a better musician from this process, he may not need, he may practice for more than 30 minutes and he may not need the video game play as a reward. So you can probably take that video game play at some point and use it as the reward for something else. So moving on, All right, our tone and language. Let's break the kids out of their cycles of feeling bad and comparing themselves to others and not being successful. It might not feel like it sometimes, but ADHD is their struggle, even though as the parent, we absolutely see it as our struggle a lot of the time. So they want to be successful and they really don't want to make us mad. I got a great tip from a fellow Marylander, Carrie McCarty Gibson. You can follow her through a Facebook group, parents of kids who struggle with anxiety, ASD, ADHD, learning differences. Carrie has homeschooled her 7 children, many of whom struggle with ADHD and other exceptionalities. So in her group, she reminds me often about the cycle of anxiety. And this is my number one thing I have to remind myself of every day. Your child's running late again this morning. You fuss at them. You give them more anxiety and they start acting out or playing with their device instead of getting ready. And I might look at this as they don't care that they're going to be late. How can this be? But the reality is this may be how their anxiety manifests, or this may be actually how they avoid that anxiety. They don't know yet how to manage their anxiety. They'll get better, but for right now, it's us as the adults, the parents in the room that kind of have to show the restraint and keep that calm, keep everything calm and not let it escalate. It's so obvious when somebody tells it to me, yet I have to be reminded of it constantly. Some more about the language. Use the language that you believe your kids can accomplish what they want to, that they can achieve something, and teach that language to them. So these are just some examples of the language that we can teach them when they want to quit. So if Bella says, I'm not good at this, we hear that a lot, right? I'm going to tell Bella, you're not good at this yet, but with practice, you will be. And the more we teach them that conversation, the more they're going to have it on their own. Chunking. Chunking is when we take big, overwhelming projects and break them down into smaller tasks. In the same way that you can remember your 10-digit phone number because it's chunked into the area code and then those 2 other segments, chunking helps with bigger assignments like term papers. So writing things down and even putting them in your planner / calendar is something that takes away some of that overwhelm. I mean, to me, I feel like just writing it down takes a huge load off my shoulders. So let's say the project is a science fair and we're going to break it down and we got 3 weeks to get ready. We're going to break it down. The student is going to need to, they're going to need to have your help the first couple times they do this. And the first couple times they need to even think of doing this, right? So they'll eventually get it, with practice. But the steps of the science fair project might be, first they have to pick their topic. They probably have to go collect some supplies for their experiment. Then they're going to perform the experiment. They're going to collect the data and make that lovely trifold cardboard entry that we all made when we were kids. So each step that I just described can be broken down into subtasks, and all these tasks can be plotted out on the calendar or the planner, on the day that it would make sense to do them. And this way, any given day may only have one task associated with it for this project. So when your only task for the day is like to measure, each plant and write those results in a table, that's not overwhelming. When children get overwhelmed, they can't even start something. So they just experience what I refer to as inertia. So chunking applies to writing essays, studying for a history final, any task that you can break down into smaller tasks and you need to do over time. Let them find their passion. So studies actually show that people with ADHD are more likely to be self-employed, and I'm living proof of this. They're hardwired with the very stuff that entrepreneurs are made of, right? They don't want to sit still in a job where they perform the same task over and over. They do want to try new things. They do want to take risks. And if we feed that curiosity that they have, it's interesting to watch what they come up with. If your mind is open, you, mom and dad, and they don't fear parental rejection, they'll eagerly try new things. And if they fail, they will bounce back. That's one of their superpowers. So even though we don't want to see them fail, they can fail and move on to the next thing. If you think about a product that disrupted an industry, think how far-fetched it sounded the first time somebody said it. You know, maybe somebody who was in high school or college who came up with the idea. You know, one day cars will drive themselves, or one day robots will vacuum the floor. It came about because of discontent with what already exists, and because of copious amounts of imagination and creativity and that blessed resilience. You may have heard of Ty Pennington. He's an HGTV home repair guy, and he wrote a book about Ty Pennington wrote how a chaotic kid became America's favorite carpenter. And he was that kid that couldn't sit still or focus. He was bouncing off the walls, and he discovered that he could focus when he worked with his hands. Who would think of that? He loved to try new things, and he loved to design things, and he managed to get all the way to college before anybody ever diagnosed that he had ADHD, and then got him on some medication. So maybe you'll find that your child is more learning ready, you know, like after an hour at the Purple Bicycle Art Studio. Or if you do discover, like Michael Phelps did, like Simone Biles did, that some physical activity help you focus, then you can use that to your advantage. So I encourage you to go all in with their passions, because I think they'll all turn out to be something wonderful someday. So if I were live in the room with you, I would be ducking now while you throw fruit. I know the feeling, you know, you the parent, you know that there's a play next week and little Emma doesn't know her lines. What if she messes up and doesn't remember the lines and ruins the whole play for everybody? That's your fear, mom or dad. But there's a couple things that could be going on with Emma. She might do better with a break right now. We're going to talk some more about breaks. Another thing is, some people with ADHD actually thrive under pressure. So her talented juices may not even start rolling until she's under pressure. Number 3, she actually may be a quantum learner. So this is what my own teachers told me about myself. I procrastinated, and I'd be the only person still holding their script in the dress rehearsal, literally still holding a script at the dress rehearsal. But on opening night, I would always nail the lines. In class, I would probably sit there like history or science. My mouth would just be agog. I wouldn't be grasping a single thing all week long. And then the night before the exam, I would reread the chapter. Okay, I'd read the chapter. And a light bulb would pop on over my head, and I'd get it all at once in a quantum leap. So applying how you work may not be what works best for someone who is wired differently. And procrastination aside, we read it all the time, let kids take a break. But I know that in the moment, when we, the parent, just realize that they're weeks behind on their assignments, and, you know, we're freaking out and we need them to, you know, get their head down and just plow through it, they actually maybe do need that break. And it's probably, I know in my case, it's, you know, mom interfering with that break happening. Sometimes they do just need to calm down a little bit. Another kind of break could be due to a sensory need. So some kids have what's called sensory processing disorder, and they might be oversensitive to noise, or it might be like the feeling of something on their skin, or the texture of a food that they won't have in their mouth. Other kids are undersensitive, and that actually ends up meaning that they need more stimulation. So they may chew on things, and they may, just stand and spin around in circles. Or they might need heavy work exercises, they're called, like wall push-ups or chair push-ups, where they're just, I think they describe it as like being aware of their bodies in space. So if you're neurotypical, this may be hard to understand. I can't really put myself in that child's shoes, but the important thing is, if that works for them, if the wall push-ups or the chair push-ups help them and put their mind in a ready to learn state, then that's what's key. And if they can recognize that they need to do that strategy in order to get in a learning ready state, then that's half the battle, if they can recognize it. I'm very soon going to be interviewing We Rock the Spectrum sensory gym. So I think I'll have a little bit more information on sensory needs in an upcoming YouTube video. So here's another one that might make you throw fruit at me. We've all learned that the little gee whiz fact that multitasking isn't actually doing two things at once. It's more correctly switching rapidly back and forth between two tasks. So our ADHD kiddos are all about that. If they have only two things to do, they're probably looking for a third. So maybe you've heard someone say, one of your kids might say they can write an essay while they listen to music, or they can do their math while they watch a cartoon. And you think, that doesn't seem right, but give them a chance to prove it, or maybe guide them on what they should do when they need a second task. So let's say they're, listening to a lecture or just listening to a teacher. If their second task is a fidget or doodling, particularly if it's doodling something that the lecture was about, that can actually help them focus. Now, if they decide to read a comic book during the lecture, that's probably not going to help them focus. So parents can kind of give kids a little direction in what they can do if they need something to fiddle with or something else to look at while they're listening. With older kids, I think once they really get into their hyper focus on their assignment, they tend to want to turn off that cartoon anyway. But having it on, at least initially, in the beginning, I think can make it possible to do the unbearable task of getting started. And when you have ADHD, getting started can just seem insurmountable sometimes. So just see what happens. Sometimes kids appreciate having the privilege of self-management, and they don't want to lose that right. So they'll scroll through TikTok videos for 10 minutes, write a little bit, scroll through videos, write a little bit. Personally, I start off my day listening to a podcast or a book on audio, and I don't want to look at my inbox, and I don't want to look at my calendar. These are anxiety inducing for me. So I keep listening to my podcast as I launch my apps, my email app and my calendar. And invariably, a minute in, I see something that requires my focus, and I have to turn off my podcast to give it my full attention. But I needed it to get me to that point. Now, I'm 54. I may not have been able to do that when I was 13, but maybe I could at 15. So we get better at it with maturity. I know we're coming up on the end of our time, and I am wrapping up. All right, Jaden, remember you figured out that you have to check the portal for each class because you may think you don't have assignments, but when you check, sometimes it turns out there was one that slipped your mind. This is how Jaden is wired, and knowing how he's wired will help him operate. I was a very, very forgetful teen, and I had a lot of rules for myself, like, tie my purse around my legs so I can't walk off without it. When a child knows themselves, if they can come up with those rules for themselves, it helps them a lot, because they'll be able to apply them without your help too. Another aspect of knowing self is knowing when you're experiencing anxiety or stress. Your child may actually need you to point it out for them a few times before they come to recognize their own stress. But once they do, that's kind of half the battle. You know, it might be like, hey, do you feel like you're a little stressed out with this paper right now? Do you want to go take a lap around the block or have a snack and then come back with fresh eyes? This may help them recognize it in themselves next time. And again, once they own it, they can take care of it themselves. So when you think back to what the kids did before COVID, some things have changed that may not even register with you. So we used to get a paper assignment. We would write answers on it. Then when the teacher reminded us to turn it in, we would turn it in. Later, the teacher would hand it back to us with feedback, no longer in red, but in some color so we can find it. It would then go in our binder, right? We'd put it in the binder with the other papers from that subject and refer to it when we were working on that thing again. So now, even if you're in person, there's a fair chance that your assignment shows up inside an application on a tiny screen. You have to open it. You can only see a small part of it at any given time, right? Because it's a pretty small screen. You minimize it to find the answers because they're probably online too. And then you reopen the document and put the answers in over and over. Then you submit it through an app. And at some point, a teacher, some bell goes off, a notification saying it's been graded and there's feedback, and you just scroll right past it. So that cycle's changed a lot. My suggestion is this, in order to try and make it a little bit more like it was before. Either print the assignment or the source material for the assignment, where you're looking up the answers. This may not even dawn on your child. They can probably print and they can probably scan things back in if you help them out the first couple times. This is just one example of identifying the sources of frustration during homework time that have nothing to do with the actual learning, and just kind of removing those. I know my son has a hard time typing into the boxes that are provided for the answers in his science homework. So he'll accidentally drag things around or accidentally delete them, and then he gets super frustrated and he hasn't even started the science. So if you can find those problems with technology and remove them, I think that's a huge help. So I am going to turn the camera back on. If anybody would like to unmute themselves, please do and ask some questions. I want to get something into the chat, and I can't copy it and paste it from here. I want to put the hyperlinks to some of the things I mentioned before. So I'm just going to type it from memory. Certainly, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. This recording is going to go up on my Facebook channel. Sorry, my YouTube channel. So I can't thank you enough for attending. I hope that you'll be able to use some of this. I hope it's been helpful for you. Thank you very much.